This is a cover for my new book, America's Electric Nazca, Megalithic Marfa, Texas. And we're back for part 2 of my flyover, the Marfa Plateau, to photographically validate the lines and geoglyphs I had discovered using Google Earth. A discovery involving the apparent importance the creators of megalithic sites had to following the solstice and equinox paths that precisely connect these sites, one to another, around the world using sacred geometry. This is a summer solstice sunrise from my home using a 75 by 300 millimeter lens. You can't help but notice the notch it rises through. And in order to create a scale replica for a backyard Stonehenge project, I found Google Earth to be the best investigative program available to the general public. And I found that these programs, layers, and line functions allowed me to follow and validate the evidence of true connections around the world, like the equinox connection to the Great Pyramid at Giza and the altar of Stonehenge, so exact that this line meets the northwest corner and the southeast corner, passing precisely over the center of the apex of the Great Pyramid. This line is the path of discovery across North America, which leads directly from Stonehenge through the heartland of America. This line also connects with pyramidal sites in Baja and Mexico, passing into the Chihuahua Desert through the paranormal Zona del Silencio. It leads directly into the Big Bend and Marfa Plateau area, and this is where I found lines and geoglyphs very similar to art found in Nazca, Peru, only seen at altitude and proper orientation and highlight by simply tracing the lines using the line tool and common sense to evaluate the results. Just remember that at no time in human history have we ever made roads that only resemble the subjects when they're lit up and seen from altitude. Because just like Nazca, these lines make no sense from the ground level, but the evidence of their existence can't be hidden any longer, now that the humans can fly. And this is Google Earth area of note. This plateau is almost the same altitude as of Machu Picchu, 7,650 feet, and is considered high desert. Like Nazca, gets minimal rainfall per year, about 12 inches. And you'll notice the cities of Marfa, Alpine, and Fort Davis form an equilateral triangle, with Fort Davis as the apex. Zooming in, you see the Marfa Plateau and can get a sense of the huge area involved. These lines and geoglyphs extend north to the Fort Davis area, east into Alpine, south past the Mexican border, and west into New Mexico. These cities are about 25 miles apart from each other, and the area is really, really desolate. And you can see just how primitive the area is. This is the approximate flight path that I took on this flyover. I chose to stay in Alpine because there's a few more amenities available. Marfa has a population of about 3,900 people, just about exactly twice the population of 1930, and went up to about 20,000 for approximately 2 years during World War II. Anyone who goes there should realize how primitive the area is, noting that only one car rental company in Alpine and Wi-Fi failures. I suggest at least one smartphone, as a radio cuts out too, according to the helicopter pilot that I had, Louis Traveland, at Traveland Aviation. For best viewing, I suggest a fixed wing, because I could only get to an altitude of 10,000 feet with the helicopter, and these lines and glyphs are more fully viewed from 12 to 15,000 feet. And this is where we're picturing in part 2, and we'll continue through the flight in as many videos as necessary. I just want to let the weight of the evidence speak for itself. When you fly over Marfa, you're flying over a multiglyph of animals made undeniable when highlit as a Bactrian or two-humped camel, extinct on this continent for 20,000 years. See it? Now also, the darker area is a soil area that resembles nothing less than a Nubian goat. And this is a particularly domestic goat that I'm familiar with from farm work I've done. And I readily admit that my line work is not perfect, but I follow the lines as closely as possible, and the dark soil is precisely outlined like a piece of tile was set into the light soil. Obviously, artificially, and far too perfect. There are at least 4 kinds of lines found on the Marfa Plateau. The first kind is the one that's easiest to be seen from the air or Google Earth. Dark lines that these are actually embedded in the soil. Some are used as fence line markers. Road type lines, all of the same width, cut through quartz deposits, apparently without explosives or detritus. And the scratch type lines you can't really see here, but they're actually there in a very noticeable radius line example that you'll see later in the video, or actually in an upcoming video. And these are easily the most curious lines. They're raised, and they may indicate that there's something underneath the soil, making the soil stay risen like this. And in some areas, they actually have been eroded. Now, the first picture we come to is one of staples. Now, these can be seen as reservoirs, but they're actually not. They're holding 2 parts of different kinds of earth together. There are also dark lines involved in this picture, road lines, and outlines. These road lines sometimes have these markings that look nothing more than like arrows pointing you in one direction, and that's what I think they are. When you get close to them, they're actually gouges in the earth. And again, you see the staple underneath the soil that's raising the soil. Dark lines, road lines, and arrows pointing you from one direction to another. Notice that the terrain hardly has any vegetation either. It's very well maintained vegetation. You can see a staple way up at the top right too. Now everything is tied to a water function, and I believe that it's because of the acidity of the aquifer that causes the electric phenomena underneath the quartz deposits. And all of these road lines are exactly the same width and have this pattern of 2 wheels that obviously couldn't have been wagons, but more like a piece of machinery made these. Now I'm showing you this below. It looks like nothing less than a burial mound to me. There are a lot of structured areas in this, and we're still going down to the south, and this is a view to the east into the rocky mountainous areas, and there's lines out there too. But there's also changes in the color of soil that are dramatically right angled. It indicates nothing less than artificiality. And here we are again, just noting that there's staples in front There are lines that go over hill and valley back here, though. And that's a line right at the ridge. Again, going over hill and valley with no stoppage. Just like they could have laid it on flat ground. And these are the dark lines that are more easily seen from the sky. And you can see this is not a fence. It's part of the soil, and there's a connective area in the middle. Again, there are water functions that these are attached to. And this is the same all over the world too. What I call polygonal construction. And you can see the obvious erosion too. Again, dark lines tied to a water function. There's some kind of decorative thing up on the wrong side to be a reservoir. Arrows pointing. It has all the looks to me of artificiality. And I'm not seeing anything as far as pareidolia. That's a concept that's actually as nuts as the scientists who believe in it. These are obvious lines. They're not my imagination. There's a connective area with no entry, no exit. Does that make any sense in construction? You can see the traces of the dark lines extending for miles and miles and miles. They're all connected, just like you would do an electrical connection. And there you can see the vast distances involved here. These lines that are shown here are probably 20 miles long, maybe more. And the road lines are just as important as the dark lines, and all together make art that can only be seen from altitude. It's an amazingly beautiful area. We're coming back up north on the first path here. Again, part of the soil, tied to a water function, with these decorative little reservoirs that are poking up the earth from underneath. And it looks for all the world like some kind of art is intended to be expressed here. And there off in the distance you see some of the mounds and such that I believe are artificially there. I believe they're created. And you can see it actually, there's a right angle function to the right of it too. These people could work with earth like it's pigment for an artist's easel. And it's an amazingly beautiful area. It's just not a whole lot of vegetation. It's all really well managed. And here you see several different kinds of lines, including the stapled areas, dark lines, connected areas, and obviously an artistic, maybe a jaw or mouth when seen from a higher altitude. I think this is all intended to be lit up from underneath and shown as a navigational tool on a dark world, because they were the first here. I'm showing some of the erosion. You can see bare traces of dark lines in this, but there have been some washed away. It's just, although I don't think it's mica because it doesn't glisten at all. It's part of the soil. And I believe it might be bronze. And that would surely assist the Marfa lights. But you can see the dark lines are outlining something that's intended to be outlined. The road lines intended to be lit up. There's no other functionality for this other than a piece of art. And you can see the equal spacing here. And those lines run about 10 miles long, maybe a little less. But you can see that they're a function of the earth and not of fencing. And you would like to dismiss roads as something of human construction, but there's no record of construction out here. And as a matter of fact, the history of Marfa, the written history, will tell you very plainly this is an area of minimal construction. They've never had a population big enough to do this, and never in enough time to do any of the work involved in especially in the different colored areas, like I showed you with the multi-animal at the beginning. And these are several different kinds of line, including the scratch lines. And there's outlines in the colors of the soil. And this is very important too, because I believe this is all meant to be tribute, meant to be seen from the sky while passing overhead. And really, much of the orientation of the glyphs, when we get into the main part of the Marfa Plateau, the orientation will be with the head pointing directly towards the Giza, Stonehenge, solstice line, or path as I like to call it. But you can see that there's clearly artificiality in these mounds. There's clearly a square top to that. Rectangular areas are really hard for nature to make. And there's no pumice out here. So anybody who is trying to say this is a volcanic area is full of birds. This is not a volcanic area, unless the volcano singularly mixed different kinds of rock with the same amount of quartz. All of the soil samples I've taken out here run about 60% quartz crystal. And that's really important because a man named John Hutchinson, who's just a guy who works with electrical energies in his garage and has created anti-gravity, has floated bowling balls, has melted steel posts with nothing more than microwaves and directed electronic patterns. He has actually caused quartz crystal to light up. Now, I was asked from a question I got when I was on a radio interview at Dr. J Radio Live. This question from, I believe it was South America, asked if there are any of these leveled off plateaus like in Nazca with lines that suggest landing areas, and I do believe that the whole thing is. And as you'll see, the lines surrounding the plateaus, they're perfectly leveled, by the way, but they're They're cut in hexagonal, sextagonal, uh, and areas, and outlined by lines, straight lines. Just as you see there, see the line? It even marks different colors, but it's a perfectly level plateau with the lines running straight down it that suggest that it has a functionality of a runway or something like that. And you can clearly see that this is several plateaus, not just one. And with the artificiality that I've already seen out here, I can only think that all of this is artificial. And that although we're not at the proper altitude, the cliff faces are perfectly cut and lined to create different animal glyphs, like horse, buffalo, bighorn sheep, and dolphin that actually, when you move northward around the glyph, it seems to have a fin rise, a dorsal fin rise, and has an artificial, like a cartoon of spray coming from the blowhole. So I don't know how you do that unless you purposely do that, and if you purposely do that, then you don't do it intending people to see it from 12 to 15,000 feet in the air. Again, it's an eye-shaped mound. I don't know how you do this unless you're purposely doing it. There are several different colored areas. All of the colors had to be, brought in purposely, I believe. And it's outlined. Perfect right angles in the color of the areas too. Although I'm going to show you several shots of this, just because I believe the first shot here is a little bit blurry, but these show a really ancient erosion here, as if the lines were actually built on top of lines, and maybe there were more than one flood that affected this area, or maybe it didn't get affected by the last flood at all. And that's why it's in better shape than Nazca itself. But I believe one explains the other because the work is too similar, especially the raised lines. They suggest several Nazca drawings. Now this is fun. This is a Tao symbol, a yin-yang symbol, done with colors of the soil. And when you see this, when it's outlined, it's part of a boat sail. And this, I believe, represents part of the boat that these people came over. This is an area that cries out that they were Atlantean. Isn't that something with the soil? And it's outlined perfectly. Can you imagine this area lit up from under the ground? Everything lit up in a different color, making different patterns, and all activated by these connectors, or I believe are timers. It's an amazing area, and it's very much a megalithic area. This involves a couple of 100 square miles. Staples, colors, outlines, again back to the plateaus, and look how clearly that's cut in an angle, precise. And there are lines all over the place, which to me just suggests directionality. But yes, there is some erosion out here too. And next time I go out to Marfa, it will be in a fixed wing airplane, so I can get a little higher and actually see everything. The really nice thing to do would be to make a night flight at about 12,000 feet over the plateau, and I don't know that the FAA will ever allow it. Do it on a cloudless, non-full moon night, and I believe that things could actually be seen from the air that are not visible from the ground, especially with the Marfa lights involved. I believe that's the function of this area, is a navigational aid, and it's all tied to water functions. They created electricity using hydroelectric means. And if you'll notice the nice square areas that outline different colors, they had a way with stone that's clearly seen here as artistic. And that's the Marfa Plateau, the main plateau off in the distance. But coming up here is this great mountain area that I'm going to be passing over. And I give you several shots of it because it looks like an artificial mountain. And just because the size is daunting should not preclude a true skeptic from visualizing this for what it is. And clearly, the evidence shows artificial means were used in the creation of much, if not all, of this area. Isn't that perfectly outlined? And you can see the directional lines on top. And some of these lines go for hundreds of miles too. But I think they see things in completely a different fashion than we do. Something more into the ultraviolet, or what we call a full spectrum. Again, dark lines tied to water functions. Reservoir areas, I believe that it's meant to slowly retrieve the water into the aquifer, to tell you the truth. And I think that's also a function of those arrow type lines that are beside some of the road areas. You can see the staples, and the lines are just incredible though. There is no loose dirt out here, by the way. It's all hard packed, something like concrete and clay mixed together, and it adheres to the rocks. And I just wanted to give you some more time out here with each of these photographs so you could see it for yourself. And although I wish I had the fixed wing for a little higher view, I think it's been a real treat being able to photograph these lines as they exist close up too, because this exists as proof. And you can see eroded lines that are just straight as an arrow. There's no record of construction out here, especially road construction. I think they had such an easy time with roads out here. It was just a matter of paving over the existing, and that's what saved the majority of these lines, is that they were so functional to use. And you can see a textured area here. Equal segments suggest artificiality. Sure looks like an eye to me. But like I said, most of the faces would be oriented in a solstice fashion. That is, with the head facing in a northeast manner. But you can see some of these staples are actually coming up out of the ground. They're so old. And this is the mountain that we're crossing. And the closer I got to it, the more artificial it looked. And you can see that there's a line across here with connective areas. There are also vertical lines leading up into it. And then the shape of the thing itself is almost pyramidal, or several pyramids together. But it's also full of caves. And I do mean full of caves. They're everywhere that I saw. And I'll give you some close-ups here as we get nearer to it. Amazing that you can see the line that stretches right across the ridge. I can't believe this is a natural piece. It looks almost like a sphinx. But you look at the stuff below it, and much of it looks like artificial mounds too. If you'll notice, the cave entrances, they're all over. Perfectly straight line coming across the top of that ridge from left to right though. Again, caves, and you'll see a line that comes right directly up to one of the caves. And it is not a path or a road. It's too straight. And you look behind it, and it looks like there's a pyramid behind it. These lines cross over hill and valley equally and never lose their direction. You can see the very, very eroded line right down the middle of this thing. Edifice. And there's a pyramidal end to it on the north side. And you can see the plateaued area. But look at the caves. I'd be surprised if it's not an artificial monument. Again, that's one of the lines that crosses directly over the ridge. I, I don't know how it's done. Now we're coming back into the Marfa Plateau. And much of this will be in the next video. And I hope to show you some really, really different glyphs. Undeniable. Now this is the eye of the matriarch, and you can see some of the hair, etc., that I picture. And you'll notice the outline is perfect. They meant for this never to be disturbed. And there's the matriarch's eye. That this is where we're going to be in the next video. Amazing, isn't she? And connects to Egypt. Thank you.